Good evening all and welcome. A happy new year to you all. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to everyone listening, whether it's been a few days, months, or even years. I appreciate you tremendously and thank you for being a part of the Mortis media community. It really does mean a lot. Let's go into 2022 with some excellent stories. So tonight I have a collection of Let's Not Meet stories for your ears. But be warned that some of these stories can be a bit triggering and quite horrifying. So, with that being said, you have been warned. But for now, it's time to get comfortable. Wave goodbye to 2021, and for one last time this year, let the darkness take control. I have this close friend, Jack, who relayed this to me. It's a pretty terrifying tale of something that happened to his friend a long time ago. My mentor Jack is now a retired former HR community college guy in his mid-60s. 30 years ago, however, Jack was working as a bartender in a bar in Portland's gay community. That's how Jack met Randy. Randy was a good-looking, well-spoken customer in his mid-20s, pretty attractive 80s preppy type. Randy lived close to Jack. The two went on a few dates for a few weeks. Randy was relatively new to Portland, having moved there a few years ago after his parents in a small town in Connecticut flipped out about him being gay and tried to commit him to an institution. They were casually dating, but Jack was shocked when he discovered that this clean-shaven college graduate was working the streets of Portland as a hustler. You see, while we think of Portland as being a hipster haven now, back in the 80s there were a lot of seedy elements to the town, and that included the gay underground prostitution scene. The revelation about Randy's career happened this way. Randy called Jack one night and asked him if he could come over. He showed up at Jack's apartment pretty upset. It was there that Randy confessed to Jack that he was a prostitute, and he then relayed a wild tale about something that had happened to him the night before with a client. He refused to name who it was, but told Jack it was a very prominent local businessman, someone that was very high profile in mid-1980s Portland. The client was into S&M/bondage stuff, and Randy had seen him about once a month for a year. The previous night, after they had concluded their scene, the client said to Randy, "I had a fantasy that I kidnapped you and kept you forever." He asked Randy if he wanted to stay with him. Of course, Randy said, "No way," and the guy got angry. The chauffeur drove Randy home, which was in hindsight a huge mistake. The client now knew where he lived. Earlier that evening, Randy was heading home. But before he got to his apartment, Randy noticed his client's limo parked down the street from his building. So Randy noped the hell out of there and ate dinner elsewhere. But when he went home, the limo was still there, chauffeur sitting in the car. That's when he decided to go over to Jack's place and confess everything. Randy was completely terrified now. He tried to laugh it off as some dumb joke, but the fact that the chauffeur had spent hours parked in the same spot a few blocks from his apartment building was scary as hell. Randy begged if he could just stay in Jack's place for a few days so that this could die down. Even though Jack was totally surprised and pretty confused about all of this, he let him stay at his place until a few days later. Randy called him at work and told Jack he decided to go back to his apartment. Randy said he'd call Jack later in the week about a movie that they were planning to see that weekend. Jack never heard from him again. When Jack went to his apartment building a few days later to check on Randy, the building manager said that Randy had moved out. After that, there wasn't much Jack could do. Randy didn't tell him who the guy was, and he didn't know much about Randy's background except for some vague idea of where he came from. And this was, again, the 1980s. Policemen were not going to make a big deal about some male prostitute that went missing. Jack kept hoping that he'd get a call from Randy at some exotic locale, but as days turned into weeks, which then turned into years, which then turned into a quarter of a century, he stopped expecting that call. Hopefully Randy just skipped town. Maybe he ran all the way back to Connecticut, found some sympathetic family member who helped get him on his feet, and he's put all of this behind him, and he's just some regular 50-something-year-old guy now, with a regular career and regular concerns. Or maybe not. Perhaps the guy did get to him. But in Jack's case, he will never know. Here is some backstory. I live in a small town pretty far away from the main city, but it's still a part of it. I live in Karachi, Pakistan. Right next to my town is a rural area with farmhouses and animals and breeding places. In this rural area, a friend of mine owns a farm with a good amount of ammunition, which is very rare in Pakistan because of gun laws. But the friend happened to be from a gun-dealing family. I was staying at the farm that night, and it was only me, my friend, and a helper there. His cousin was usually there, as the cousin owns the farm, but he was off doing some work that night. Me and my friend were on the rooftop smoking cigarettes and drinking some beer when I noticed a large semi-truck approaching down the highway into the rural area. It came down the road, and just when it was about to make the turn to go onto the farm road, the headlights went off. That's when we knew it wasn't a friendly truck. My friend made a dash outside carrying a 9mm pistol, which was usually enough to scare people off. But just to be sure, I stood on the rooftop with an assault rifle. Our goal was to only scare these people off and not do anything stupid. Now, my friend made a big mistake, standing outside the farm, and some people shot rounds straight at him. As you can imagine, we were petrified. My friend ran to the other side of the road in a panic, no clue what he was going to do, and I shot a whole clip into the air trying to scare off these guys, basically saying we have larger guns as well. It seemed to work, as the guys left straight away, and my friend came up, and we sat and smoked more, thinking about what we should have done. We were considering going to the police when the guard dogs began barking like crazy. These were well-behaved dogs that would not bark for any reason, and they seemed to be barking at cattle. I ordered them to quiet down, which they normally would do right away as they obeyed me, as I had trained them, but they didn't seem to budge. They kept on barking and biting the cattle, when the helper let out a scream that was immediately hushed out. I actually thought that the helper was shot dead or something. I was scared out of my mind, so was my friend. I made my way down to find the helper lying on the floor with his head busted open. That's when I noticed the farm door swung wide open. One of the guys, or the robbers, had snuck into the farm and hidden among the cattle, looking for the perfect opportunity to open the farm door. I looked up to see my friend with horror in his eyes. The truck was approaching again. I'm pretty sure I almost crapped myself this time, knowing full well that we were not only about to get robbed, but probably killed too. I untied the dogs immediately, thinking they would provide at least a bit of help. My friend tossed me the 9mm, and I stood there shaking, waiting for a possible shootout death. That's when the luckiest thing I've ever seen happened. The police had been reporting shots fired and then made their way to the rural area. It was rural, so it took them quite a while, but their timing was amazing. The red and blue lights possibly scared the robbers away, but they were like angels sent from heaven for us. We told the cops everything that happened, and the cops offered to stay with us for the night. We accepted it, and told the neighboring farms about the lurking threat as well. Thankfully, nothing like that ever happened again. My whole life, my mum was single. and tried hard with the best of intentions to find me a suitable father figure. My own father is a homeless drug addict who was out of my life long before this. I was about 10 at the time, and we were visiting a friend of hers who had kids that I got along well with. Her friend was always trying to hook up my mum, also with good intentions. We had been visiting all day and it was getting late, and I was tired and ready to go home. I go through the house and find my mum on the patio talking with the guy she was to be hooked up with that night. As I stepped out onto the patio and set eyes on him, I was immediately stricken with a deep-seated feeling of dread and wanted nothing more than to get my mum away from him as fast as possible. In fact, looking back at his face, he almost seemed evil in a way I cannot explain. As this hit me, I tried to stay calm, and I asked my mum to come inside so that I could speak with her. She came inside and I told her I wanted to leave as soon as possible, sensing that I was feeling distressed for some reason. And being the great mum who always listens to me in situations like this, she said okay, and soon after we left. As soon as we were on the road, I told my mum exactly how I felt and that I didn't want her to ever see or speak to him again. Once again, not wanting to upset me, she said okay and didn't speak to him again. Maybe 6 months later, my mum's friend calls to gossip as they frequently did, and she tells my mum that the same man from the night was now in prison. He had gotten together with a woman who had 2 kids, and one night he ended up locking the kids in a closet in the same room, and he had their mum tied to a bed and repeatedly raped her. My mum was sitting on the floor of the living room reading the newspaper, as she usually did while on the phone with her friend, and I was on the couch next to her watching TV. And I will never forget the look she gave me as she told me this news. While I was in university, I took my motorbike down to pick up my wife, who was my girlfriend during this story. She worked in an office building downtown and was fortunate enough to get off work early on Friday afternoons. So I hopped on my Kawasaki Ninja and headed downtown. I called my girlfriend with the comms unit attached to my helmet to let her know I was near her office building and looking for parking. She informed me that she would meet me at the food court in the mall that is across the street from her building. Now, for reference, I always bring my helmet with me no matter what. I learnt my lesson from leaving it on my bike and having it stolen once before. The other thing is, I had a second helmet in my backpack for my girlfriend. Safety first. The second helmet will become important later. After meeting her in the food court and having a meal, we wandered around the mall, looking at engagement rings and such. She found a ring she liked very much and, yes ladies, I ended up buying it. While I dumped my wallet out on the counter and imagining my bank account emptying, my girlfriend grabbed my arm and said, "Hey, the same 2 guys have walked past the store for the 5th time while we've been in here, and they keep looking at us." In order to relax her, I responded with the ever-clever, "They're just jealous because of how damn good I look in my riding gear. Really, it's a problem." Through laughter, my girlfriend proceeded to inform me that my sexy outfit made me look like a fat ninja. With the 2 guys forgotten and my ego obliterated, we left the store to make our way towards the bike. To get there, we had to go down 2 escalators, walk across the bottom floor of the mall, across the street, and into the lot of her office building, where my bike was parked. Just as we stepped onto the first escalator, my girlfriend suddenly grabbed my arm really tight and used her eyes to draw my attention to 2 guys directly behind us. I looked back at her, and with a slight nod, she confirmed that it was the same guys that had walked by the store. I took off my backpack and pulled the second bike helmet out the bag and handed it to my girlfriend so that we could hasten our journey. As we stepped off the escalator and made our way to the second one, I caught the reflection of the 2 guys in the glass window of the stores in the mall. They were behind us all right. I could hear them making comments about my girlfriend's appearance to each other as we walked, but not quietly. Their comments were loud for other people to hear. When we reached the second escalator, my blood was boiling. It took everything in me to not turn around and face the perverts head on. My girlfriend absolutely hates conflict, and out of respect for her, I kept my mouth shut and doubled our efforts to leave. While we were walking towards the exit on the main floor, I heard it. The sentence that will forever make me paranoid. One of them said to the other, "Let's kill him and take her." For the sake of your ears, dear listeners, I did not use the vulgar words that they used to describe their intentions. My girlfriend's grip on my bicep tightened like a vice, and then I heard it and saw it. She was sobbing, and I could see the wide-eyed fear in her face. I pushed her directly in front of me to force a faster pace out of the mall. We exited and started to turn the corner of the street, where we had to cross. My girlfriend kept looking back with a panicked voice, and she said, "They're coming." Hearing the fear in her voice made something snap. I shut everything out and went cold. As soon as we got out of the corner, I forced my girlfriend around it and went against the wall. I looked at her, and she looked right back at me. We ran. I took the helmet that she was clutching in her hands with a firm grip. She took off across the street heading for the bike, and I stood there waiting. I took the moment to get my helmet on for protection, and took the second helmet in my hand ready. I heard the sound of running footsteps coming down the sidewalk around the corner. What happened next may just be the craziest damn thing I've ever done. Before I continue with the story, ask yourself, if you heard those words from two perverts following you and your loved one, would you play it off as them being punks trying to scare you, or would you take it as seriously as a heart attack, like I did? These two threatened to kill me. I was okay with that, I accepted that. But what they threatened my girlfriend with, I refused to brush off. She was a victim of sexual assault before I knew her, and absolutely refused the smallest chance of something like that ever happening to her again. As soon as the two guys neared the corner, I stepped forward and gave them the universal sign for slow down by taking a swing. Let me be the first to tell you that when a motorcycle helmet meets a person's face, that's the start and the end of a fight. Period. No, I didn't end his life, but I guarantee the guy felt like I did. Pervert number 2, at my surprise, didn't even flinch at the sight of his body being destroyed. He threw some punches and I took those punches. We locked arms and he slammed me into the wall. I pulled my head back and headbutted the guy with my helmet on. He stumbled backwards and I seized the moment and kicked him on the side of the knee and threw some punches of my own. At this point, my girlfriend had made it back to the bike and had called the authorities. Being downtown, they came quick. Now here's the part I regretted. I grabbed the helmet I used to take down pervert number 1 and sprinted to my bike. I didn't wait for the authorities to arrive, with the story my girlfriend gave to the police. The two guys left broken on the sidewalk with lots of witnesses. I figured the smart thing to do was head directly to the bike and take my girlfriend away from the horror show. The two perverts ended up being arrested and taken away. Apparently they had a history with law enforcement. Luckily, I was not thrown in the back of a police car for being the first one to dish out damage. Witnesses, their prior offenses, and security camera evidence from the mall saved my ass. I meant it wholeheartedly that I was willing to go to jail to protect my girlfriend from two predators. The following summer, we got engaged and I got her a new helmet. I threw the old one out as it was a constant reminder of that scary event. I'm not sure what the pervert do or are up to these days, but for their sakes, let's not meet again. Because if we do, you can bet your life I'll have my helmet with me. I am in my mid-40s. This happened way back when the world was not such a scary place. I was born with kidney disease and had several surgeries from 1 to 11 until they got it right. This instance was when I was about 5. I had just been released from the hospital, and my mum had to stop at the pharmacy, the only one in our little town, on the way home from me being discharged to pick up my meds. She pulled into the strip mall where the pharmacy was located. Apparently some store was opening in the center, because there was music and I saw balloons everywhere. But I was tired. I had been laying on the back seat and remembered looking out and laying down and Mum locking the doors. Rolling down my back window about 5 inches, as we live in Florida, so you never sit in the car with the windows up, and telling me not to leave the car. I think I fell asleep. I awoke to the horror of an arm reaching through the window, unlocking the door. It was a clown. A clown was coming to get me, kill me for all I knew. I never trusted clowns. He opened the back door, and I jumped over the seat into the front and laid on the horn, screaming like a wild child. My mother and everyone within earshot came running. The clown was apologetic, offering a twisted balloon in the shape of a giraffe, saying, "He just wanted to give it to me." No thank you, no way. I was inconsolable. And that began my unnatural fear of clowns. I even hated Ronald McDonald. Sorry, a clown is a clown, a person hiding their face, and even at 5, I had no time for that. Fast forward 2 years, I'm 7, in the hospital sharing a room with 2 other kids and a free bed. For those of you who don't know, kidney problems are miserable. You have to pee, you can't, and when you do, it hurts badly. I'm just out of surgery, and we get a visitor to cheer us up. Clowns. I'm groggy and losing my mind, screaming again, crying inconsolably. Why the hell are the clowns in my room? I didn't ask for them. I'm sick and in pain. Get the hell away. After they remove the clowns, and the nice nurse sits with me until I fell asleep, I wake up with a friggin' giraffe balloon that a clown had left for me. I know it was probably coincidence. I think giraffe is the basic balloon animal required for clown college. In any case, I'm an adult now, and I swear to heavens if any clown approaches me, I will consider it a threat on my life and dropkick the sick SOB. Before the story begins, I need to share some information with you. I'm a 24-year-old woman from a small town in the north of England. At the time of this story, I was 22 and enjoying my first girls' vacation in Alcudia, Mallorca, Spain, with another friend called Lizzie. So the event happened on the first day of our holiday. Earlier in the day, we had arrived and decided to take a look around. Me being cold, I decided not to wear sunscreen, which I would come to regret later. In the evening, while looking at my skin, I noticed that I was red raw, especially on my legs, and wanted to numb some of the pain that was already irritating me. Lizzie and I decided to go out for drinks and see the town. The night was warm, and we were in a state of bliss, going from one bar to the next, enjoying cocktails and countless shots. The first girls' holiday was starting off amazing. While out, we happened to find an English bar tucked within a street next to the small canal that ran through the town and led to the sea. Lizzie, who was already feeling out of her depths and struggling with the Spanish language, decided that the bar would be the best place for us, even though I, for one, was dreading it and preferred the Spanish bars. I had, after all, come all this way to get away from England. This bar was covered from top to bottom with English flags, sticking out like a sore thumb beneath the lights of the town. In truth, it was a horrendous sight, one which the drink flowing through me couldn't hide. So going inside, we ordered a few cocktails once again, and we sat down at a booth in the corner. While we were drinking, I could feel the sensation of someone staring at me. Even though we were in a booth, it seemed like whoever it was staring through the booth, and in the back of my head I asked myself, is someone staring at us? I asked Lizzie with a frown, feeling nervous. Something didn't feel right. It felt like someone had run ice down my spine. I don't know, she shrugged drunkenly, not caring or looking up from her cocktail. Letting out a sigh of frustration, I reluctantly turned my head and locked eyes with a man standing drinking at the bar. He was no older than 30, with dark hair, dark eyes and a beard, and incredibly tall to boot. It was his eyes that caused me to flinch slightly. They were so dark and filled with nothing but fury. The more I looked at him, the more his expression became ever more unwelcoming. Had I done something to upset him? Was this his booth? Surely not. I'd only walked into the bar and ordered drinks, and no one there was ordering at the time, so I couldn't have pushed in. Turning away, I tried to ignore his glare, and I stayed there for a few more moments until Lizzie finished her drink before declaring that I needed the toilet. By this point, every red flag in the history of red flags was going off. Walking to the bar, I asked where the toilets were, only to be told they were in the back, which meant I would need to walk around the glaring stranger. I thought about just holding my pee in until I got back to the hotel, but I didn't know when that would be. So, pulling up my big girl panties, I followed Lizzie, who was already heading in the direction of the toilets. As I passed the man, I kept my head straight and refused to look anywhere but at the wall. That was until I felt something connect with my leg, followed by pain. Quickly looking down, I managed to catch his foot pulling away from my leg and back to the floor. He just kicked me. I stared down in shock for a little while as his laugh filled my ears before I took off running into the toilets. They were tiny and had no lock. There was a sink with a tiny mirror and then a stall which fortunately did lock. While Lizzie was resting against the sink, I hurried in and began to do my business. As I sat there, I looked down at my badly sunburnt leg and saw the imprint of a muddy heel print on my left leg. He really had kicked me. Grabbing some tissue, I roughly tried to erase the print. I was angry and also shocked. I didn't understand why he was so angry. While I sat there peeing and debating my next move, I heard the door open. "This is the girls' toilets, boys next door," I heard Lizzie say, in her carefree and unaware tone. For some reason, I knew I had to get out there and get Lizzie outside. "I know, lass," a rough Irish voice replied, followed by a laugh. The laugh. It was him. He followed us in. "I'm here to see if you want to have some fun." Yep, we were dealing with a creep. Pulling up my pants, I want to open the door only to find the lock was jammed. Typical. "What kind of fun?" Lizzie asked innocently. "Don't talk to him," I screamed in my head, desperately trying to pry the door open. "I have coke. Do you want to buy some? We can go somewhere to take it if you're up for it, you and your friend." "No, we don't do drugs," Lizzie answered him sternly, now suddenly sober, making me feel relieved. It would be easier to get out of this mess if we were both in the right mind. "You sure? Aren't you looking for a bit of fun? Come on, girls. I promise I won't bite." The charm of the Irish accent was no longer charming. "Look, mate, I said no. Can you get out the girls' bathroom?" That's my girl. As dumb as Lizzie could be sometimes, at least she was a stern woman when she needed to. "Alright." And with that, the creep grumbled and left. I readied myself to give him a piece of my mind, stepping out of the toilet with the nastiest glare when I managed to catch the back of him walking away as the first door swung closed. "We need to leave," I said to Lizzie, giving her a shared pointed look. "Yep." Once again, Lizzie took the lead and exited first. I could see we were both praying he wouldn't still be there, but as we turned the corner, he was there as before, drink in hand, glare on face. Taking my hand, Lizzie squeezed it and began quickly dragging me past him. As I passed, he kicked me once again. As he did so, I turned and gave him my harshest stare. "Kick me again, mate, see what happens," I yelled, taking a step closer. Seeing the stunned look on his face, I allowed Lizzie to start pulling me away. "Yeah, you got nothing to say now, do you, creepy dickhead?" Looking back now, it probably wasn't the best thing to do to make a creep angry, and you'll see why after what happens next. But once I open my mouth, there really is no stopping it. We leave the bar and continue on our night, exploring other bars and completely forgetting about the creep. It was around 4 a.m. when we decided to make our way back towards the hotel. We'd gotten about halfway there when we heard a voice shouting from behind us. "Get here, you stupid girls." We turned our head and saw the Irish creep standing a few paces behind us on the opposite side of the road. Why did he have to be here? Neither of us said anything or looked at each other, and turning away from him, we walked a bit faster, wanting to put distance between us. Even with him on the other side of the road, we didn't feel safe, and unable to stop myself, I kept glancing over at him each second to see him match his pace with ours. "I said get here. No one disrespects me. I'll teach you both a lesson, you horrible little teasers." He continues to rant on, his voice getting louder and angrier with each word he spat. He then went into horrific detail on what he was going to do to us. It was extremely graphic, very disturbing, and involved rape as a minimum. Knowing the situation at hand was now incredibly serious and dangerous, I leaned into Lizzie and whispered that we needed to find help, but all the bars around us were now closed and no one else seemed to be on the streets, just us. Turning to look at him again, I saw something shiny in the light glistening under the streetlights as he suddenly took charge and raced towards us. As he got closer, I saw it was a knife, and feeling my blood run cold, I let out a startled yelp. "Run! Lizzie, we have to run!" Running as fast as I could in a blind panic, I pushed and pushed on Lizzie's back, trying to get her to run faster and make sure she was in front of me. If one of us was going to get caught and die, it would be me. My first thought was to keep Lizzie safe. She was one of my closest friends, and if something happened to her and not me, I would be devastated. "Don't run, I just want to play," cackling as he said that. I could hear his footsteps slamming against the ground as he gained on us. I never looked back, but I could picture his face in my head, the twisted grin and the knife in hand readying itself to go into my back. Where had he even got the thing from? It made me wonder if he planned to hurt someone tonight, and me and Lizzie just happened to be the targets he set his sights on. "A bar! A bar!" Lizzie yelled, pointing to the side of me, and turning my head, I saw a bar, the lights on and a few people still in. Rushing forwards as fast as we could, we slammed into the bar doors and basically fell inside, startling everyone. We close! We heard a man behind the bar call out in broken English, waving his hands at us. "Please," I whispered, walking towards him. "We're being followed." "No, we close." He started it again. So I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, desperately trying to put in Google Translate what I needed to convey to him so that he wouldn't kick us out. "We're being followed, please, he has a knife, please." My words came out fast and panicked as I struggled to use my phone, my fingers no longer wishing to work. And then someone said, "It's alright ladies, you're safe." We heard a voice say that and turned to look, seeing a man sitting at the bar with a young girl who we came to learn was 16 and the owner's daughter. Luck was on our side that night, and I felt so fortunate to have met the great man sitting at the bar. He was northern just like us, and came from the town next to ours. He actually now lived here, and was the owner's best friend and was able to translate what we were saying. Springing into action, both the owner and his friend raced out the door and began looking for the guy, while the owner's daughter did her best to comfort us. I'd like to say there's more to this story, but unfortunately there isn't. The Irish creep was just gone, and the owner of the bar took us back to the hotel, making sure we weren't out of his sights until he knew we were safely inside. The rest of the holiday was fun, and we never saw the man who chased us again, but things took a turn for the worse for me. Remember the beginning of the story when I got badly burnt? There were second-degree burns, and I ended up contracting an infection and was stuck in the hospital battling sepsis once I returned home. I was in agony for weeks, but fortunately I'm fully recovered now and doing well. So to the Irish creep, let's never meet again. And a note to myself and anyone else listening, always wear sunscreen, even if you think it's cold. I live in Tucson, Arizona, the most boring place possible. So for the day I turned 18 there's really only one thing fun to do on your 18th birthday. Go to the strip club. I had a friend who we will call Trish. She was excited to take me to the club for the first time, and I was excited. I didn't even care who took us, which, now I know, I should have. Trish introduced me to her friend called Sandy. She was a tomboy kind of girl. You could tell she was a lesbian, and she was with her two cousins that were around 30 to 35. They were definitely too old to be hanging out with 18-year-olds, but like I said, I didn't have a care in the world. Once we were ready to go, looking all excited and cute, Sandy and her two cousins came and picked me up. They took us to the only strip club that would allow 18-year-olds in, since they didn't serve alcohol. We got there, and my friend was stuck in the car since she lost her ID. So I was stuck inside with both the men around me. Pretty awkward. They were pretty quiet at first, but slowly opened up more and started tossing so much money to the strippers. We were having a really good time. After hours, we decided to go home. I was getting so tired I didn't have the energy to go all the way home, so Sandy offered to let me stay at her house with her two male cousins, which I now know was the biggest mistake. I mean, I barely knew them for one, and second, they were way older men. We get to Sandy's house, and I passed out fast in one of the empty rooms. I woke up to a loud scream that was coming from a man. My friend and I instantly got up. One of the male cousins burst into the room and began yelling that we had taken his money. He began throwing everything around him, breaking things, and I sat there scared, thinking this was the end and that I was going to die. Me and Trish kept screaming that we didn't take anything, but no matter what, he went on and on about how he had $200 in his cabinet in the room we were staying in and it was gone. He said he had been looking for it all morning and that we had to be the ones to have taken it. He started to order us to give him our purses and phones. My phone was completely dead, so I couldn't even call for help. He then made me call Sandy. I guess she had gone to the store real quick. He went crazy telling Sandy how he knows we stole the money. Then he calmly handed me the phone and Sandy said to us, "You guys aren't going to be able to go anywhere. I'm going to go home and strip search each of you." My heart sank so low. I've never been this scared in my whole life. You only see these things in movies. Luckily, Trish had a mouth on her, so she wasn't backing down to anyone. He went to grab her purse from her, and she went at him, and they both ended up in a brawl. I knew this was the time. I had to get help before Sandy came. I looked crazy. I had just woken up and was wearing the long t-shirt given to me to sleep in, so I can only imagine what people were thinking seeing a little girl dressed crazy wailing for help while running in the street. I ended up going into the first store I saw. I ran so fast in the door, begged to use the phone, saying someone was holding my friend hostage. The workers and customers stared at me for what felt like forever, and finally the manager snapped out of it and let me. I called the police, and while on the phone I saw my friend running out the house. I knew she had been able to get out because she had gotten scared, and he knew I was calling the cops. We waited on the other side of the street for the cops to come, and we saw the male cousin walk out the house and run in the opposite way, obviously trying to flee the cops. The cops didn't do anything. It was aggravating to know that if this had happened the day before while I was 17, they would have rammed in there, but since I was now 18, we weren't even taken seriously. I bet a lot had to do with how we looked. We decided to just keep walking and try and find someone to let us use their phone. Most people said no. I'm pretty sure they thought we were thieves by how we looked. When finally one lady did let us use her phone. We were so far from Trish's house, so I just had to call my dad to pick us up and take us back to Trish's. My dad said yes, so now it was just a waiting game. While waiting for my dad, I had heard someone in the distance. Once I realized who it was, my heart dropped. It was Sandy and her two male cousins. They were in the car, following us, trying to chase us down. We ended up running so fast to a small liquor store, but right behind us was Sandy, running straight towards us, yelling and begging for us to come back to the house. She would not let up no matter how many times we said no. She kept apologizing, and for a second I thought I believed her, until I looked at the car and saw the male cousin that had accused us of stealing his money. He gave us the most evil stare. Finally, after what seemed like forever, my dad showed up and we ran to his car. While we were driving off, we looked back and saw Sandy and her cousins staring straight at us. They looked so angry. I can't imagine what would have happened to us if we'd have gone back. I mean, the promise of a strip search and all the horrors that I could only imagine would happen next because of the money we had never even taken. I know it would have been more like hostages than company. Months later, after finally putting the event behind me, I had moved into a new apartment complex. One day as I was going to throw the trash out, I randomly started to have a bad feeling. I look around and saw that man, the one that had accused us of stealing the money. I ran fast into my apartment, and from that day on had my boyfriend throw out the trash instead. Luckily, I saw a new family move into the apartment he was living in. It was a huge sense of relief. So, to the man who spent $200 on strippers, forgot, and then blamed me, please, let's not meet again. I volunteer twice a week at an apartment complex to tutor the kids there and teach them STEM-based stuff. Sounds fun, right? It's really fun. But there's a parent who always comes to check on us, and he is honestly starting to creep me out. My friend and I are both ethnically Indian, and he always decides he wants to talk to us. He doesn't talk to any other volunteers. Sometimes he asks questions about India, which is weird because my friend and I were both raised in the States. But the weird thing is that he always tries to offer us food, even though we always just say no. Just this week, he literally tried to coerce me into eating an Oreo cookie, even after I told him multiple times I didn't like them. He then proceeded to bombard me with questions like, what kinds of sweets do you like? What kind of food should I buy you? When I refused all of his suggestions, he told me that I'm a tough one to crack. I don't know, it came off as very creepy. It's not the first time he's done this. He literally forced my other friend to take a Starbucks drink, and then he asked me multiple times if I would like a Starbucks. Some of you might think, hey, that's not so creepy, he's just pushy. But it gets worse. Even weirder, my friend and his daughter were once doing an activity together. He took a picture of them both, then asked my friend for her age. My friend replied, 15, and he told her, I'll show you this picture when you're 21, maybe we can finally meet. Today, he had asked me how to pronounce the name of a certain Indian dish. I told him, and he just exclaimed, that's my Indian girl, and he came to grab my shoulder and arm. It honestly was too much. My friend saw and spoke about it later and was like, he's really creepy, I'm a little bit frightened for you. I honestly don't know who to tell. He's one of the parents and I don't want them to think I'm overreacting. But seriously, I think we're only a few steps away from this becoming something far more sinister. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. Depending on when you listen to this, you might even be listening to this in the new year, so Happy New Year. I wish you all a very prosperous, wonderful, and joyous new year with lots of opportunities, fun, and health and happiness. What more can you wish for, right? I hope everyone has an amazing, amazing year. Right then, let's see. Do I have anything important to say other than Happy New Year? I don't know. I don't think so. I am just really grateful for each and every one of you, truly. You guys subscribing and watching the content that I produce really does mean the world to me, and it's always great to know that I can make you guys happy and that I can put you to sleep and that the content I make really does make a difference, so thank you. The iOS version of the app will be out soon, probably. I really hope so. We are working really hard on it. I have been reading and getting some feedback about stories just vanishing after they're gone, and we am working on it. So, we do take your feedback and comments on board. I would like to also give a huge thank you to my patrons and members and coffee supporters whose names are on screen. I'm sorry I didn't update it much in December. For December, as it is for most, is usually a very pressing time. But hopefully in January things smooth out and I'll be updating it every 2 weeks like I'm supposed to. Again, thank you all so much for everything. You guys really mean the world to me. With that being said, I think I'm going to end it here. Hopefully you all have a really lovely few days. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.